Start the season after Labor Day. 17 regular season games over 18 weeks. Additional playoff teams and expanded playoffs on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And still, the NFL can't schedule a Super Bowl on President's Weekend.
Ah, yes, the greatest winner in Super Bowl history, Bill Belichick, passing his thoughts along on the NFL playoff schedule and, of course, the NFL season in general. Hi, everyone. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History. I'd like to welcome you to another edition, our second 2022 show. And I kind of want to clean up what I was doing last week. I inadvertently, I constantly like to do the research and just add some, I'm hoping some unique information and data and research that you normally don't get on, let's say, the sports shows or other websites. And this week I'd like to focus, just kind of clean up the John Madden. And also because there was some interesting things I saw there. And also I want to delve into a new website that I provide cartoons for, and that's ball9.com. And each week they give me some great events in baseball history. I'd like to go over that and just share some, again, some knowledge and some research that I've done with the cartoons, and maybe just highlight another new sports website that you can go to for all things baseball, especially now during, as I've always maintained, the best part of the season, and that's the Hot Stove League, as we have the advent of baseball, really spring training, due to arrive in 6 weeks, hopefully, if they can get the lockout solved. But anyway, I do want to go back a little bit, as I normally do, and anybody who is new to the show, I want you to see this as I do a lot of this ad-libbed. I do some research. Howard and I, we come up with maybe some sports ideas for the week. A couple of weeks ago, when John Madden passed away, he immediately was on the same wavelength I was, and believe me, he's got many wavelengths going on in that brain. I maybe have one or two that are barely functioning sometimes, but we thought about John Madden, and as I stated last week, always enjoyed his broadcast, never liked him as a coach, couldn't stand the Raiders, but nonetheless, begrudgingly give him this. He was a winner. We focused on the number of playoff seasons that the Raiders were involved. The fact that he did finally reach the promised land and win the Super Bowl, and actually exercise many of the demons, that is, the other coaches who kind of had a spell on him and his Oakland Raiders. And with that, I'd like to segue right into his record as a coach against other playoff teams. Now, I did him, and of course, this week, my focus of the cartoon is on Bill Belichick. This was the cartoon the figure, the caricature of Belichick that I do all the time. And of course, he's in the hoodie with the headphones, the modern day head football coach, of course, with the charts and the plays and everything else in color coordinated fashion. But I really wanted to see this. I always thought Madden was not so much overrated, but that he kind of fell into the spot with the Oakland Raiders. And I think that many pro football fans thought the same, if they weren't a Raider fan or if they didn't root for the AFL/AFC. They probably felt the same way. And I always felt that Madden on the sidelines was this big blowhard in the striped or white shirt, business shirt with the tie flailing all around. And I did mention last week that 52% of his games, he won by double digits. That in itself is pretty remarkable, especially when you can take a look, and I think NFL did some research on this. I think over the last 10, 12 years, the average NFL game is decided by 7 points or fewer. So basically a touchdown or an extra point. And here is Madden really exceeding that with winning so many double-digit games. And I didn't even break it down into wins by 10 to 15 or 20 28 and then just an out-and-out blowout. The only game I really remember that still bothers me today is that Madden really spanked the Houston Oilers in the 69 playoffs, because I was an Oiler fan, and I do believe that they had a quarterback named Charlie Johnson. And we talked about Johnson being a New Mexico State alum who played in or participated in the Sun Bowl. So everything seems, and I'm kind of glad about this, everything we kind of make a connection with. But anyway, that game, Oilers were never in. And I remember being at my grandmother's house watching that debacle, and they lost 56-7 to the Oakland Raiders. The Raiders didn't get into the Super Bowl that year, as they lost the next week to the Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, Kansas City goes on to win the Super Bowl against the Minnesota Vikings. Nevertheless, Madden, I was looking at his record. Now, as I stated, he goes 2-1 his first year in the playoff system or against playoff teams. Well, rather than bore you with all the individual stats, let me just say this. Madden's overall record against playoff teams, and how I figured that out. If Madden, each year, I listed all the playoff teams, and then I went to do the research. Did the Raiders play them either during the regular season and, of course, in the playoffs? And I discovered that it's kind of interesting. For a while there, Pittsburgh owned him. Then he started owning Pittsburgh. And do you realize that one of the few shutouts that Madden registered was against those Super Bowl winning Pittsburgh Steelers in an opening day regular season game? He beat them 17-0. But his overall record against playoff teams was 19-22-1. Now, that being said, it's not maybe you could consider the greatest of them all and all the rest of it, but it is not bad nonetheless. And that is, he's going against great teams. You have to remember, there were some really dynasty-type teams. I mean, look no farther than the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were winners of 4 Super Bowls in the 70s. All right, Madden starts 1969, retires in 1978. So those 4 years, he's dealing with a buzzsaw. To me, in a lot of respects, it's like Al Lopez with the White Sox and or Indians defeating the Yankees during the regular season and then, losing in the playoffs to the Dodgers and the Giants. 2 really good, solid teams from the National League during that time. Because you can, just go into baseball. Take a look at what really Lopez did. Maybe I should, this is fascinating. Remember, I'm going off on tangents. This is like us being in a bar after a big softball win, and we're having a couple of beers and a hamburger, just celebrating everything and talking sports. And as I always say, one thing leads to the other. But, Lopez in 54 and 59 defeats the Yankees in the regular season, with the winningest team at that time, the Cleveland Indians, winners of 111 games. And it's not like the Yankees gave up. I mean, they lost, but yet they won 103 games themselves. Then they lose to the Giants, Willie Mays' catch and all the rest of it, 4-1. It would be interesting had Mays not caught that ball. And probably many baseball historians who are maybe witness of the game and saw the game probably say that was really the turning point in the series. Who knows? Maybe Cleveland wins. They go on and maybe they defeat the Yankees again. Nevertheless, they lose. They don't get back to the World Series until the 90s. And then here, lo and behold, Lopez goes on to the White Sox and he brings them their first pennant since 1919. And he beats the Yankees again. But then who does he lose to? Another New York team. The Dodgers now in Los Angeles. But that Dodger team played in how many World Series against the Yankees in the 50s? And the Giants were in the other 2. Oh, and then the Phillies were in 1950. Oh, and at the other end, bookended was the Milwaukee Braves, who had the great Eddie Matthews and Hank Aaron and, the great pitching staff. All right, so you're talking about a guy who was able to infiltrate all that and get to the promised land, okay, and came up a little bit short. Well, Madden was the same way. In many respects. And I pointed out that Madden didn't have the beauty of Warren Spahn, who's the guy I was thinking of, the great pitcher for the Braves. But Madden, I told you, his highest draft pick was 19. He got Henry Lawrence way back when, much into his coaching. Noel starts off he's able to grab Mean Joe Green, and Terry Bradshaw. That's a big help, all right? And that was because the Steelers were so terrible. Now, you got to give Noel his credit too. And I did do Noel's, and I apologize. I just can't locate his stats. But he was over 500. But it wasn't that much over 500. And the reason why I chose Noel is, obviously, I really believe that the Raiders' arch enemy during the 70s was without a doubt the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's number one. Number two, ironically, Noel comes into the Steelers. However, they're in the NFL the same year that Madden is named to guide the Oakland Raiders. So really, their careers mirrored each other. And of course, we're talking about that one play, the Immaculate Reception. Steeler fans say it was caught. It was legit. The referees determined there was no replay. But even, here's another where I'm going off on the deep end, even the replay, and this is supposed to be the be-all and end-all. Let the robotic eye of a camera determine plays. And to this day, you cannot get a definitive angle where you can say the ball bounced off the Raider defensive end or that it touched Frenchie Fuqua and then fell into the arms of Franco Harris. All those different angles, and still we're missing something on it. Regardless, think about it. If, and it's always, my brother always says, if is a huge word, especially when you're talking about debates and especially sports argument, that IF is a big one. But let's just state this. If the Steelers had that play overturned, maybe they don't become the dominant force. And maybe the Raiders finally get into the promised land under Madden a couple of years sooner. Don't forget, though, the following week, the Steelers had to play Miami in Three Rivers. Didn't have the home field advantage then. They alternated the championship, the NFL, which was kind of foolish. And, of course, that was the Miami team that was unbeaten. Almost similar. The offense for the Steelers just wasn't there yet in both those contests. If you recall, Steelers were losing 7-6. All right, regardless. Madden loses that game. All right. He lost a couple other ones. His first year he lost to Kansas City, but Kansas City probably it was their year in the AFL. Remember, they played in the first Super Bowl. Then it was the Raiders, who lost a tough game to the Jets in 1968, which led the Jets to winning the Super Bowl. So if you think about it, the Raiders lost to how many eventual Super Bowl winners? They lost to Kansas City in 69. They lost to Baltimore in 70 in the championship games I'm talking about. They lost to Miami in the championship game, and Miami goes on to win. They lost to Pittsburgh. That's 4 championship games he lost, Madden, in the 70s and late 60s, all right? He lost then to Pittsburgh again in the championship in 75. He finally beat them in 76, and then he overwhelms Minnesota. And then in 77, he lost to the eventual Super Bowl runner-up, the Denver Broncos. In fact, Denver, he lost to them. That was a tough game too, and that was like a 4th and goal, as I recall, on New Year's Day, and Denver stopped the Raiders basically at the goal line. And again, you're saying, hey, had the Raiders won that game, they're playing, it's the if. They're playing the Cowboys, all right? And we all know that Denver was not going to beat the Cowboys because the last week of the season, week 14, they lost to the Cowboys in Dallas, and it wasn't even as close as the score indicated. And then, of course, Madden doesn't make the playoffs, although he guides the Raiders to a 9-7 win in 1978. Actually, I was looking at that 78 team. He lost to all 4 of the AFC playoff teams, including twice to Denver, but he did beat Minnesota in basically his last game. I was even looking at this. Had he beaten, I think, Denver just once, he would have made the playoffs. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, he goes 19, 22, and 1. Not a bad record against other playoff teams in his career. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, I do Chuck Noll, but bear in mind, Noll was over 500. But how do I say this without knocking Noll? Because I thought he was a very good coach. Anybody who's an architect of a team that was just terrible and just is the architect behind their renaissance has to get some sort of credit, super credit, for doing what he did. He wins 4 Super Bowls, no losses there. That really paves the way for his success. However, what I did was I also included his first couple of years. Originally, what I did was I just took his playoff years and saw it okay that, yes, he was still better than Madden. But then I said, you know what? I included Madden's last year. Let me do the same for Noll. And I do recall this. He had some early problems with the Browns in his own division, 70 and 71. But then, he knocked them off a few times. And, of course, then they become the Steel Curtain, the Steeler dynasty of the 70s. But my point is that he lost quite a few games against other great coaches. And as I said, I know he was over 500. And he almost has to be because he's got 4 championship seasons there where he just runs right through the playoffs. So that's 12 wins in itself, or maybe even 16. All right. Because I think the Raiders, I think the Steelers don't even get, let's say, a bye into a thing. So they probably won 3 rounds, 2 AFC contests, and then the Super Bowl. Then I was saying, all right, let me see where Madden and this fella, because I think there is and can be made an argument that he's probably the greatest coach in the history of the game. And, of course, I know people are going to say, well, Lombardi was so great, never had a losing season. Meanwhile, Belichick did. I will tell you this. I'm not using this as an excuse. Belichick did a pretty good job in Cleveland while he was there. Where they really started to tank is when Modell decided, hey, you know what? We're leaving Cleveland for Baltimore. And that he will even admit to that played on the psyche of the entire, not just players and coaching staff, but the entire franchise. And that's kind of where they went to pot. But he wasn't that bad, Belichick, when he was in Cleveland. He got into a couple of playoffs and all the rest of it. All right. So I'm digressing, but I just wanted to go over this guy's record, and it's incredible. I can't believe how many games he's actually coached against other playoff teams. Now, you can say this. Here's the argument that, the NFL has expanded the playoffs. Now we're up to, I think, 7 teams that are making it. When Lombardi was there was only 2. And I'll get back to Lombardi because what I do is I also include the runner-up in the Western Division when he was playing. And that happens to be, let's say, Baltimore a couple of times. It happens to be Detroit a couple of times and Chicago. So I did kind of, not so much pad, I tried to get more data for Lombardi. Anyway, ready for this? Lombardi finished his career 19 and 15. Now, why did I say Lombardi first? So 19 and 15, basically over 500. I'll give it to you right now. Lombardi finished over 19 and 15, real quick, 6 and 5, 11 and 6. He's got a better than 55% winning percentage. Ready for this? So that's 34 contests that he played against, let's say, not so much against another playoff team. All right. He does lose to Philly his first year. And he does lose to the Giants during the regular season back back in the day. He actually goes 0-3, 2-1, 3-1, 2-1. He actually went 0-2 against the Bears when they won in 1963. And, of course, he doesn't make the playoffs. Goes 4-0. Probably his best 2 years were the 1965 season when he beat Cleveland in a revenge game because, I shouldn't say a revenge game per se, because Cleveland won the championship the year before with Jimmy Brown. In 65, they beat Cleveland. And Baltimore, they beat them 3 times. In fact, that was the thing. They beat Baltimore in a playoff game just to play Cleveland. And that was after going 0-2 against Baltimore in 1964. 66, they run the table. 67, they run the table in the playoffs. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. They go 4-0 in 66, and they go 3-1. They actually split with the LA Rams in 66. And then, interestingly enough, when he was in Washington, and he basically had a plebeian type of group, although he had the great Charlie Taylor and Sonny Jurgensen and a couple others. But again, here was a guy who comes in after a year out of retirement, comes in to rebuild the Washington Redskins because they were terrible in the early 60s and late 50s. They were terrible. And he went 0-4 against playoff teams. You take that one away, and I will. With Green Bay, he's 19-11, almost winning 66%. With a terrible Washington team, which was really terrible, he went 7-5-2 in his last year in coaching. He tied Philadelphia, and I think he tied Detroit. But he lost twice to Dallas, which made the playoffs. He lost to Cleveland, which beat Dallas in the playoffs. And he lost to L.A., which had gotten off to an 11-0 start. And then they lost their 4 last games of the 69 season, including 2 of the last 3 to Minnesota and 1 in the playoffs to Minnesota. So you're talking about some good teams. The only team who didn't play for the NFL that year was the Minnesota Vikings, who got to the Super Bowl. So Lombardi finished 19-15. All right. To end all suspense, ready for this? Bill Belichick is 96-72 against all playoff teams. That's incredible. He's basically played in his career, 168 games. 168 games against other playoff teams. And they go 96-72. He's 24 games over 500. That blows off the competition of any of the great coaches. Now, did I do everybody? I didn't do Shula. I didn't do Landry. I didn't do Hallis. I didn't do Curly Neal. As I go, and I have a little bit more time with this, I'd like to see. He has a .571 winning percentage. Now, as I stated, you take out Lombardi's, and this is where many of the people will say about Lombardi, you take out his last year with the Washington Redskins, he's 19-11, guys. I mean, he's winning almost 2/3 of his games against other playoff teams. But it was a different league then, a different time. All right, so you have to take it in context. I would actually argue that, but you still have to sometimes make a determination and say who's the greatest coach of all time. And I know Lombardi has a trophy named after him, and everyone is judged according to Lombardi. But boy, oh boy, Belichick makes an unbelievable argument to being the greatest coach of all time. I mean, and he does have the rings to prove it. I mean, I was thinking that as a player, not as a player, but as a coach of the Giants, as part of this team with the Patriots and stuff, I think he's been involved in about 1/5 of all of the Super Bowls. But of course, you can argue this. Well, while Lombardi was alive, he was involved in the first 2. He was involved. Well, he wasn't involved in 1969. So he was involved in 2/3 of them. I get it. But I think sports fans know that what I'm trying to say is that Belichick maybe not has the personality that everyone likes. Maybe he's not admired. I know he's had some controversy in his career with the Spygate and all the rest of it, but the guy can flat out coach. And you could argue that missing Tom Brady last year probably put them back a little bit, but they're qualifying for the playoffs this year. And I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl. Look, I try not to make predictions. First of all, I'm usually wrong. And number two, what is a prediction, right? Got to put your money where your mouth is. And I'm not ready to do that because I normally lose. But when he's 92 and 71, I don't think if I was putting him up against Chuck Noll, or Bill Walsh, another guy I really didn't check, it'd be pretty interesting to see how they measure against him. And of course, Walsh, and I probably will do Walsh when I go off the air. I probably will do Bill Walsh before I do anyone else because he's got 3 Super Bowls. So he's had a number of big victories. And of course, I will look up Parcells too, but I have a feeling that Belichick probably, just blows him out of the water. That's my gut feeling about it. But 92 wins. I didn't include this year. So it'd be interesting to see what happens this year. And the reason why I didn't is that when I started compiling this, I didn't know who was going to make the playoffs or not. And I just didn't want to kind of like tank it or water it down potentially, or just give the wrong fact on it. Like I said, Chuck Noll, not bad. All right. Lombardi, and I'm going to throw out the Washington one right now, 19 and 11. And here is Bill Belichick. And remember, he's done this with both Cleveland and the New England Patriots. In fact, when he first started out in 91, ready for this? He was like his first 4 years with Cleveland, he was 9 and 16. So if you want to take that out, 9 and 6, actually 9 and 22. You take out those years just for the fun of it. He's 90 and 50 with New England. Pretty good. Anyway, just interesting stuff as we talk about it. And this all came as a result of John Madden. All right. Here is the other thing I'd like to do. I'll show you the cartoon. I want to save that one first because this is a funny one. I've been contributing work to a website, and it's called Ball 9. It's all things baseball, so I hope maybe you can take a look at it and maybe enjoy some of they do a lot of history. I really like it because it's a lot of history. So what we're doing right now, we are doing a series of, let's say, some of the greatest events in baseball history. And some of them are odd. Like this one is, there is a fellow by the name of Ray Caldwell. And this is why I like the site so much and why I like this project that we're on, because they have given me a number of subjects and a number of events that I simply was unaware of. It's been really, really interesting. And each week they give me about 10, 5 to 10 selections to make. Pardon me, guys. I'm just plugging in. I have to leave you here, and this is the craziness of this show. Howard, you don't have to cut this because I think that adds to it. The little Soupy Sales move, the little Captain Kangaroo, the little Saturday Night Live with the show. We try not to edit the show, first of all. There probably wouldn't be a show if we edited. But anyway, come on, listen. Listen, Ray. Don't worry. You're 31 and 17 for us since you got struck by the Bolts. But before you pitch, just let me get into the dugout. All right. So, little context to the cartoon. This is a fellow by the name of Ray Caldwell, who is a pitcher in the in the early part of the 20th century. He played for the Red Sox. He pitched for the Yankees for a number of years. And he finished up his career, and this is where I'm going with this, with Cleveland. He actually had a 36 WAR, and he was 134 and 120 with a 3.22 ERA. But here's the thing.
And this is where the story unfolds. Here, I'll put the cartoon up so it's better than seeing my ugly mug. Anyway, in 1919, he pitches for two teams, the Boston Red Sox and the Cleveland Indians. And in his first start, according to the story, in the ninth inning of a game in which he's throwing a two-hitter and obviously a shutout, he gets struck by lightning on the mound. And he's on the ground. And instead of being carried off the field, he refuses and pitches a complete game shutout, getting his last guy on a slow dribbler to second base. I think the guy's name was Dugan, if I recall. But anyway, it was his first win with Cleveland in a Cleveland Indian uniform after going 7-4 before the trade by the Red Sox to the Indians. That year, and this was late August, he actually wins 5 of his 6 decisions that year, 1919, in the year that he gets struck by lightning. Here's the thing, though. He got struck by lightning a number of times. And I'm not laughing because being struck by lightning is a serious thing. All you Yankee fans remember about Phil Rizzuto and how he saw a guy get struck by lightning, and boy, oh boy, he was the first one to the dugout whenever he saw lightning appear. And I think it was in a minor league game that Rizzuto witnessed that. Anyway, here's the irony of it all. Prior to being struck by the initial bolt of lightning, ready for this? Calwell was 134 and 120 for his career. He was 96 and 99 with the Yankees. After getting struck, and then 7-4 with Boston. So he was basically 500. He was 103 and 103 in his career. After he got struck by the bolt of lightning, he actually won 31 games against 17 setbacks. Now, I will tell you this. Cleveland in 1920 wins the World Series. But pretty good move by the Indians because he won 20 of 30 decisions that year. That was his only year that he won 20 games. He was a pretty fair pitcher, guys. He won 18 games with the 1914 Yankees. He won 19 the following year with the Yankees, although he had a setback. He goes 19 and 16. I got to be honest with you, though. Ready for this? He has a sterling ERA in 1914. It's under 2, 1.94, this Ray Calwell. And of course, I'm unfamiliar with him. And this is what I really like about this show and why I really love, just digging up information and getting these kinds of projects, because I really do love to learn more about the players. In fact, I even have, I think, a picture of Ray Calwell. And it's, get this, it is a Cracker Jack one. I couldn't get it in black and white. I don't think my machine was printing in black and white, but that's me. Here's Ray Caldwell, though, with the New York Yankees. It's a Cracker Jack card that was inside the box, or I don't know whether it was, I'm pretty sure it was inside the box that you got it as a surprise. I don't think it was on the outside where you cut it out. I'm wondering, though, I am sure this might be worth quite a bit of money if you have that obviously intact, that it's not in any way damaged, etc. Because I will do a show about a number of cards we got, a friend of ours gave us from 30 years ago, the 1990s, and I think I mentioned that last week. Anyway, Ray Caldwell was a pretty fair pitcher. He won double digits 5 times in his career, and then he wins the 20th for a 6th time in his career. The only problem is, while with Cleveland, he had a sterling ERA of 1.71 with Cleveland in that stretch run in August. The next year, he goes up to 3.86, and his final year at the age of 33, he goes 6-6. He actually had 37 games he was involved with. He started 12, so he basically completed all the games. So he goes 6-6 for the 21 Cleveland Indians, who in 1921 were 94 and 60, so they finished in second place. So he didn't hurt them, didn't necessarily help them. Now, I would love to say that his ERA, after being hit by the bolts of lightning, also improved. But I will tell you this. from the research that I've done, and look at this, I have to show you this. This is like my Indiana Jones book that my wife, Barbara, gave me for Christmas to do all kinds of ideas and stats in it. I was looking at his strikeouts, and actually 15.5% of his outs were strikeouts in his Yankee career and Red Sox career. When he got to the Indians, though, it dipped to 13%. Now, many scouts will say that's a pretty good indication that you're losing something on your fastball, although I'm wondering if he threw the lightning ball. But still, he amassed, he didn't have a great ERA overall with the Cleveland Indians. It was 3.95, but still not bad. It's still under 4, and he is older. And I'm not trying to make any excuses, but he had to be doing something right in order to earn 20 wins against 10 losses in 1920. Now you can say, well, he benefited from the fact they won 98 games. All right. They finished first and they win the World Series. I get all that. By the way, they won the World Series in 7 games over the Brooklyn Robins. But in order to win 20 games, let's face it, it's like the old adage, if you lose 20 games, you got to be a pretty good pitcher. If you win 20, you got to be a pretty fair pitcher too. And you can say, well, I remember Jim Merritt winning 20 for the 1970 Reds. Okay, he did have arm trouble after that season, never recovered and all the rest of it. But you still have to be a pretty decent pitcher to win 20 games. I'm sorry. You still have to be a pretty decent pitcher to win 19. And the fact that he had 35 decisions, let's say in 1915, with a 2.89 ERA, even though he only went 19-16. I mean, any pitcher who had those stats today, 1916, 289 innings, and you threw 300 innings, I mean, you're talking about a $20 million contract. So this guy, pretty fun to do this kind of research. And I thank Ball 9 for giving me that opportunity because I've learned so much about this fella. He actually finished, and I'm going to segue into this, with a WAR of 36.3, which is not bad. He threw 2,200 plus innings in his career. And ready for this, he also had 8 saves and a decent whip. Now whip is the number of batters or number of runners that are on base average per inning for you. So if you give up a walk, hit by pitch plus a base hit, all right, you would have bases loaded, and your whip might be if you got 3 outs. I'm sorry, I'm not even going to give you the formula for whip, but I just want to tell you it's the number of people on base, and they divide it either by 9 or 3 outs. I'm not really sure. I think they probably divide it by 9. So if you allow, 12 base runners in a game, then your whip might be, if you divide that by 9, it's probably by about 1.33, meaning that there is 1.3 batters every time on base when you're pitching in each inning, which of course leads to all the other statistical metrics and the analysis that obviously the more base runners you get on, the more probability that you'll give up runs. I mean, doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that one out, but his whip's not bad. All right. It did go all the way down when he was with the 1990 and got hit. His whip was in no 6th decision, 0.9. So nobody got on base with him. I actually think this, probably the bolt of lightning when he got struck on the mound that time, probably really psyched out everybody on the team, on the opposing teams, that they didn't want to face him. And I will tell you this, I'm at the 40-minute mark here. I'm just going to continue with him because I would like to save my war anger moment. I'm starting to get kind of angry and confused with war. And I'll give you a premise for my next show. It's going to be on Ernie Banks. I'm almost determined to call it the Ernie Banks rebellion against war, because this was my segue from Ray Caldwell. I would like to return to him and just give you, some of his other fascinating stats. But real quick, here's a guy, and find me a major league pitcher. And yes, in context of the time, it's pretty
The game is totally different. But Ray Caldwell pitched over 220 innings in three times in his career. He pitched 300 innings once, obviously, and that was the year he went 19-16 with the 1915 Yankees. And that 1915 Yankees, they were 69-83. So you're talking about a team that finished fifth in the American League East. In the American League. I'm so used to saying East and West, but there was only 8 teams then. He won 19 games. You take away his 19-16 record, they are even worse. They're 50-67. All right, there's 17 games under 500. Find me how many guys win actually 19 games with a team that doesn't win 70 games in a season. Yes, 154, but I think you guys know where I'm talking about. Next week, so that I don't rush this, I want to talk about war again. And again, it's involving Ernie Banks. And I'll just post his picture. This is from, I think, 1962. But in 1955, Banks, and this was one of the things, Banks is the first shortstop to hit 40 home runs. He hit 44. He actually he hit 3 fewer than the other 7 shortstops in the National League combined. And yet his WAR was lower than Duke Snider's. And we'll talk about that next week. Maybe I'll leave you with a cliffhanger. As always, thanks Howard Fredericks, and thank all my fans out there, all 2 of you who watch Park Ridge Sports History. I'll be back with another one, and thank you for joining this week. Have a great, great week. Bye now.